Aloha and welcome to Ehana Kako. We're here every week on the Think Tech Hawaii Broadcast Network. I'm Keli'i Akina, president of the Grassroot Institute. Today we're going to produce a special edition, just an in-house talk to let everyone in on what Grassroot Institute is doing in Hawaii and across the nation for Hawaii. The episode is entitled How Grassroot is Changing Hawaii. And I don't want this merely to be a promotional time. I actually want to help anyone who has learned about the grassroots movement to understand how we think and what type of ideas we bring forth to the public and what difference it really makes. Joining me today to have that conversation are two of our team members in the Grassroot Institute and the grassroots movement at large. The first is Anderson Blum. We call him Andy. He's the executive director of our work for Grassroot Hawaii Action in Washington, D.C. Andy, aloha, how are you doing?
Aloha, welcome from the coldest place in America today.
Yes, indeed. They're admiring you, or you're admiring other parts of the world. Are you keeping warm?
Just barely. I think sentencing me up here instead of warm, sunny Hawaii was a cruel thing for you to do.
Well, thanks for all you do there. Many people may not realize that Grassroot Institute and Grassroot Action are a part of the very same movement committed to the building of a better economy and government in Hawaii, but we do it from two ends. We do it from Honolulu and the Oahu and the neighbor islands for the Institute, and we do it from Washington, D.C., where we move resources and people for the benefit of Hawaii. I'd like you also, who are watching, to meet Malia Blom-Hill. She is our policy director and our legal coordinator for the Grassroot Institute, and Malia Skypes in with us today. Malia, aloha. Your voice is a little soft, so you may have to up your volume just a little bit, but so glad to see you today, Malia.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Very good.
Washington, nothing is happening right now.
Well, it gives us an opportunity to chat a bit. Malia, in fact, let me ask you a question. You have been with the Institute for many, many years. You helped craft our policy positions. You supervised the writing of many of our reports. What role have you seen the Grassroot Institute play here in Hawaii? Why is the Grassroot Institute an important institute for Hawaii?
The Grassroot Institute is really unique, and I think that's a great thing. We ask the right questions, we research, educate on free market issues, on best practices, on economic issues, how to make Hawaii a better state. No one else in the state, no think tank, no organization, comes at all issues and such a wide variety of exactly this position. That it's a principal position, which I think is speaks to our integrity as an organization, our consistency as an organization, and what people really look to us.
Thank you. Malia, I apologize to you and to our audience. You've got some really bad weather there where you're camped out next to the nation's capital right now. And so I think it's affecting the sound. We might be able to play with it just a little bit later on, or I'll just ask you short yes and no questions you can nod or shake your head at. Let me shift to Andy in the meantime. And Andy, from your perspective, having actually observed the Grassroot Institute and the entire political scene in Hawaii for many, many years, you've been actively involved in it here as well as the Washington, D.C. side. What, if anything, have you seen in terms of the growth or the evolution of the Grassroot Institute and the role that it plays?
Well, frankly, I think the evolution of the Grassroot Institute, both in Hawaii and in Washington, has been remarkable. And I think that the last couple of years have shown an extraordinary growth, not so much in terms of the size of the organization, but the impact that Grassroot is having in Hawaii. And obviously there are the high profile things that have occurred, like the lawsuits involving the AHA and those type of things. But also what I've seen is an involvement in issues across the board where the Grassroot Institute has formed a way to speak to both sides of the aisle and bring reasoned thinking into a lot of issues and legislative action. I am, how can I say this? With no disparagement to anything that's happened before, it's broadened its reach and broadened its audience and gained a great deal of credibility representing the people of Hawaii and now in Washington. What we do in Washington is to be the center right voice from Hawaii here, and we're making Hawaii and Hawaii issues visible to a Republican Congress and to a very significant movement here, so that people are finding out more about Hawaii, finding out issues that they didn't know were important to Hawaii, that our representatives haven't been doing a very good job for us on.
Andy, one of the things I'd like you to address is one of the ways in which the Grassroot Institute and Grassroot Action work for the benefit of Hawaii. For many years, those who were frustrated with what we call the Jones Act, a set of shipping laws that somehow hinder and slow down our economy, people have been frustrated with that, but unable to do anything about it because this is a federal law. And we've been able, through Grassroot Action, to bring national and international attention to this. And the thing I like about that is it's Hawaii's problem and it needs to be updated a bit for the 21st century. But we're not alone. If we stay in Hawaii and merely talk about it, we are alone. But when we actually bring in allies from Europe and from Asia, as well as across the country in terms of congressional delegations, we've got a loud chorus, not to mention, of course, the territories such as Puerto Rico and Guam. And you've been active in doing this. Can you tell us a little bit about why it's been in the interest of Europeans and Asians to urge our United States federal government to modify and update the Jones Act?
Well, the Jones Act, in Hawaii, we feel the pain of the Jones Act very acutely, as do the people in Puerto Rico and Alaska. But what we don't necessarily realize is everybody in America pays some small tax for the Jones Act. And they pay, people in Philadelphia and New York pay more for their oil because it costs so much to ship it on a Jones Act ship from Houston. People in North Carolina, pig farmers, pay more for their feed because it costs so much to ship down the Mississippi and or the St. Lawrence and to North Carolina. So they're buying their feed from overseas. But then this gets to another problem, and that is we just have seen the negotiations for the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Everybody, I think, has heard about this big trade deal in the Pacific. All 11 nations want some Jones Act reform because it hurts their shipping interests. It costs them money, and because they can't sell ships to the U.S. We're negotiating now with the government is negotiating with the European Union for the Atlantic Trade Act. And the two highest priorities for the European negotiators are reform of the shipbuild provision of the Jones Act and what they call international relay, meaning a ship on one long trip could then stop at two different U.S. ports and load and unload cargo. Every nation in the world that does any kind of trade with the U.S. is affected by the Jones Act. And we've been working successfully to build a coalition in America of organizations that realize that the Jones Act hurts not just Hawaii and Alaska and Puerto Rico, but hurts every one of them. And we've gotten, over 20 organizations now that have expressed desire to help us with this. But also, we're forming an international coalition, and we have organizations in England, in Sweden, in Denmark, in Africa, in South America, in Asia, that are joining this coalition because the world wants to stop this penalty that really hurts us in Hawaii. It hurts people all around the globe.
Right.
And it just doesn't make sense.
Well, what I like about your work is that it doesn't focus on political partisanship. It is not about taking a Republican or a Democrat stand or even an independent stand. It focuses on an economic principle that is so very important to us in the grassroots movement, and that is the promotion of the free market. We truly believe that wherever the forces of supply and demand are left to the free market without the interference of government, you actually end up solving problems. You give consumers more choices. You allow the market to operate the way it was supposed to operate. And that principle very much applies to the issue of the Jones Act and the cost of shipping goods to Hawaii. In fact, even those who may support the Jones Act themselves have said, yes, there are problems in terms of the prices that we ultimately get because of the central and significant regulatory role that the government plays there. Well, I want to thank you, Andy, for being on board with us today, and Malia as well. We're going to take a short break, and during that time, try to work out the sound problems coming from Malia. And I'd like to say to our audience, thank you for being with us today. But don't go away. We'll be right back, and we'll talk about a good number of issues where Grassroot is making a difference for the sake of Hawaii. We'll be right back after this short message.
Here's the deal. I'm Jay Fidel. I'm the host of Hawaii, the State of Clean Energy, which is the Energy Policy Forum's program on Wednesday. That's how we call Wednesday Energy Wednesday. We call it Energy Wednesday every Wednesday. Are you surprised? Okay, and we try to get guys like Jim Alberts here from Hawaiian Electric who can tell us what's really going on in energy. We want to be informed. It's so important. It's the most important initiative in our state. Clean energy is major, okay? And that's why we cover it on this show. That's the deal. What do you think, Sharon?
I think that's great. That's why we're here every Wednesday from 4 to 5, and we hope you all join us so we can hear people like Jim coming on our show and co-host Ray Starley from Hawaii Energy.
Okay, Jim, you've been here today. You've seen this. You heard what she said. What do you think?
I think it's a tremendous opportunity for people to come together and talk about the issues. Oftentimes, there isn't a good forum to bring these key issues out into the public, and this is a tremendous way to go about it. And the activity of this show is essential to keep talking about energy because, as you said, it's such an essential part of our lives that we need to pay attention to it and we need to think about the future.
Okay, Ray, your turn.
Well, this is a special time in the history of Hawaii where we're making some pretty radical changes in the way we use energy and generate energy. And this show is the one place you can count on coming to every Wednesday and hearing something about the latest issues that are on the table, being discussed, that will affect us all going forward. So come join us, and if you have some ideas you want to share with us about energy, give us a call and let us know. We'll put you up here and let you talk for an hour. So come see us.
Thanks, Ray. Thanks, Sharon. Thanks, Jim. It's great to be, from Think Tank's point of view, it's great to have this show. We love the show. It's our most important show. So come around and listen to us 4 to 5 on Wednesday. Thanks a lot. Bye.
Aloha.
Aloha.
Welcome back to Ehana Kako. We're here every week on the Think Tech Hawaii Broadcast Network. I'm Keli'i Akina, president of the Grassroot Institute. The Grassroot Institute is a research think tank, and there are two things we basically do. On one hand, we research, taking advantage of a network of think tanks in 50 states, so we're able to come up with an understanding of what the best practices are for fiscal policy, for legislation, for other kinds of policy that our state enacts. But in addition to the research that we bring to bear upon legislation and policy issues, we also are active in trying to change the world as it is, to become something better. Freer markets, greater individual liberty, limited accountable government. Those are our goals, and we're very active in doing that through education, through community activism, as well as working in Washington, D.C. to help change the laws through our Grassroot action. Grassroot Institute consists of two basic organizations, Grassroot Institute of Hawaii, which is a nonprofit 501c3 organization, and the Grassroot Hawaii Action, which is a 501c4 organization that can be involved in political activity. Although it is involved in political activity, we're nonpartisan. We operate along the lines of the values of the free market. And again, that may need a little bit of explanation. Sometimes people think the free market is Gordon Gekko of Wall Street, where anything goes. But that's not true at all. The free market, when operating well, brings about the greatest prosperity as well as the greatest ethics. There's competition for a better system that provides more for consumers, and also a playing field that is competitive but fair. Some people think that the free market means we're promoting that there should be no government whatsoever. And that's not true either. We believe there's a very important role for government to play. Government needs to ensure that contracts are enforced. And most importantly, government needs to ensure that property rights are upheld. And without that, we can't have the functioning of the free market. So there's an appropriate role for government. And at the Grassroot Institute, we're looking for that limited and accountable role for the government. Now, let me go back to Malia. I think we've solved our problem with the sound. Malia, this principle of free market, that pretty much guides the policy that we produce as we go into legislative sessions, as we deal with government actions and so forth. How have you seen these ideas about the free market begin to impact Hawaii through the Grassroot Institute?
Well, the important thing that the Grassroot Institute does, in my opinion, is that we're not just a think tank. We don't just meditate on free market principles. We're about providing free market solutions. And that's a voice that's sorely lacking when it comes to addressing the problems of our state. That's what our role is. You know, when we look at the issues that we have facing us, take homelessness, for example. The legislature just opened and everyone's full of, you know, this legislative session is going to be about addressing homelessness, but all the solutions are triage solutions. What is required is what the Grassroot Institute does, which is look at the problem and say, you know, we need to get down to the base of the problem. We need to look at true free market solutions to this, not just, you know, how can we address the problem before the next election, which is where politicians usually come into it. And so we're looking at not just lack of affordable housing, but what are the underlying conditions that have caused this? What are the economic, what are the free market solutions that can create prosperity in our state and solve this homelessness problem, not just as a, oh, people don't have enough houses problem, but as a, what is the whole constellation of economic issues that Hawaiians face? How is this not just a problem for the bottom, but for, you know, all ranks of Hawaii society? And, you know, these are the kinds of places where free market thinking, where Grassroot Institute really shows their value to the people of Hawaii.
I'm glad you mentioned the problem of homelessness and housing, because you're absolutely right. Many of the solutions that are proposed are what you call triage. They're just Band-Aid solutions. They're noble in and of themselves on the micro level, giving people food to eat, clothing to wear, shelter to live in, or moving them from one place to another. Each of these measures has some value, but as you point out, it doesn't solve the problem. And at Grassroot, we want to look at a free market analysis. In other words, what are the things government is doing to the market that shrink the supply of land available for housing? Is there an artificial shortage of housing imposed by our land use policies and by our zoning? What about incentives the government provides to businesses? Do they actually work as disincentives? Or why is it that we don't have the capital we need to have the jobs and the industries we need? Is the government doing things that prevents Hawaii from being a destination for great amounts of venture capital? And Grassroot Institute is one of the few places that is looking at these macro issues in terms of the role government is playing and isn't playing, and showing how when the free market is promoted and the free market grows, we create a greater level of prosperity. Let me switch to Andy now. Andy, an example, case in point, is the approach we are taking to the Jones Act. And very often the Jones Act is bifurcated between two different poles. Those who say, let's repeal this 100-year-old shipping law or set of shipping laws, and those who say, on the other hand, let's keep the status quo the way it is so that we don't ruffle the feathers of any of the parties. But we've cut a middle ground that actually has great traction politically, great traction in terms of being able to bring people together and rally them around a solution. You want to tell us a little more about that?
Well, this is where the two parts of Grassroot most effectively show how they work together as one. And that is that the research and thinking and planning and the think tank part of the Grassroot Institute provided the alternative to full-on repeal. And there are some very real problems with that we won't go into a lot of detail, but it is not the great solution people want to see. But there needs to be some solutions. And that's why we're looking at reform And this is reform that, Grassroot Hawaii Action is the point of the spear. Grassroot Hawaii, the Grassroot Institute does the research, does the thinking, but then we're here in Washington because the Jones Act cannot be dealt with in Hawaii. So we're here in Washington to take that planning and get it to the legislators, get the support of international groups, of national groups, reach out to senators and Congress people to give them a rational alternative. And grassroots action is that function of the entire grassroots picture. We are making very real headway in getting legislation written. Literally, as we're speaking, we're getting legislation prepared that will end the shipbuild restrictions. Our allies want this, and the aspects of this for Hawaii are enormous, even just in terms we talk about shipping to Hawaii. A shipbuild, removing the shipbuild restriction of the Jones Act could very well restore our ferry service.
Yes.
Which is a big deal, as anybody who, like me, has lived on the outer islands can tell you. The international relay would make an enormous difference. All the ships passing Hawaii would be able to make stops. But it doesn't take away the important factors for national defense. It doesn't take away the important factors in terms of keeping maritime industry alive and well in the United States. So this is the kind of reaching a rational and intelligent and frankly saleable plan that I can take to Congress people, to supporters and influencers in Washington and say, let's move on this.
Well, thank you, Andy. And in fact, if anyone is watching today and wants to get a primer on what the Jones Act is all about, or what the issues that we've addressed today, such as the Native Hawaiian issue with regard to the Supreme Court that Andy mentioned earlier, there's a one-stop place where you can get all of this information about Hawaii economy, government, and society. It's the Grassroot Institute website. We keep an archive of research there that is free and available to everyone. Journalists use it from time to time. Researchers use it. Legislators, I know, have told me they use it. Go to grassrootinstitute.org, grassrootinstitute.org, and just use the search function. Type in whatever you're interested in, and you'll get the latest research that's available. In fact, in addition to that, Malia has written some national level articles, an excellent article on the Jones Act. I've been able to publish the work of our staff as well in national publications, and those are one-stop places to get information. When we come back from a short break, in fact, we can start chatting about it a little bit now. One key example of how free market thinking impacts Hawaii is in one of the changes that's taking place even as we speak. Last year, we were very involved in the research and advocacy around a shift in Hawaii that is going to be a very significant shift, and that is moving labor, wherever appropriate, out of the hands of government and government unions into the private sector. We saw that something very, very bad was taking place with regard to needs in Hawaii. People were not getting hospital needs met. Clinics were shutting down. The needs of those who need our state hospital were not being met at all. And an acute place for that to have occurred was on the island of Maui. And during the last legislative session, we worked along with many others. We can't take the credit, but we worked with many others to see a change, to see a shift in a grip on the labor supply in hospitals from the public to the private sector. Malia, we've got a couple of minutes, and wonder if you can comment a bit about that. You were very much involved in that research effort.
Yes, I can't take all the credit. A lot of my other staffers at Grassroot really looked into the abuses that were taking place in Hawaii's hospitals, and we had this sort of terrible situation where people were not getting hospital access, but we were paying, as Hawaii taxpayers, a huge, huge bill for people to not get the medical care they needed. So the creation of the Maui public-private partnerships was something that we were very strongly involved in the last legislative session, and very happy to see a shift to new solutions to deal with these kinds of problems. You know, we've been very entrenched in the same answers. So this kind of goes back to what we were saying before, very entrenched in the trying to find the same answers, kind of walking the same lines. But when you're just forced to confront something doesn't work, it's time to look at these new solutions.
That's right.
And that includes this.
The public sector unions have played an important role in providing for the guarantees for workers and the betterment of conditions and wages over several decades until law ultimately has caught up to ensure that for workers today. But something was going on. The private sector, the public sector union members were concerned about their jobs. Clinics were starting to close in the public hospital system, and the costs of labor had skyrocketed. At one point, it was over 70% in the Maui hospitals. So we have been part of trying to come up with a solution for the 21st century. And this shift of labor from a strongly government-controlled setting to private sector allows for more competition. And we expect that that will expand to the state hospital system on other islands. And as a result, what do you anticipate we'll see happen for the people of Hawaii, Malia?
Well, I hope what we'll see is taking inspiration from this to address some of the other problems we have in healthcare access and education. At a bare minimum, I would like to see a lot better healthcare access on all the outer islands.
And what's very gratifying is that we're seeing people across the aisles, whether they're Democrats or whether they're more conservative Democrats or whether they're Republicans, embracing the idea of change because it's good for Hawaii and it's based upon the principle of the free market. We're going to take a quick break right now and be back for our final segment, in which we're going to talk a little bit about how we're dealing with a federal government department, the Department of Interior, and the impact that it has on the future of Hawaii. This is Grassroot Institute's weekly program, E Hana Kako, on the Think Tech Hawaii Broadcast Network. We'll be right back after this.
Aloha, my name is Kirsten Baumgart-Turner, and I'm the host of Sustainable Hawaii at thinktechhawaii.com. We air live on the internet and also on Oceanic Channel 16. I'd invite you to come for a fresh new show every Tuesday from 12 to 1 o'clock. I try to bring on guests that give us a different viewpoint on aspects of sustainability in Hawaii, as well as trying to unpack some of the difficult concepts of measuring and achieving sustainability, particularly with regard to sustainable economic growth and prosperity in Hawaii. Please join us every Tuesday from 12 to 1 p.m. Mahalo, aloha.
Aloha! How you doing? It's me, Angus McTech, asking you to come join us on Think Tech Hawaii Hibachi Talk. Join me and my two hosts, Gordo the Tech Czar and Ender the Security Guy, every Friday from 12:45 till 13:45. See you on Fridays, and remember, let your wing gang free wherever you be.
Welcome back to E Hana Kako, here every week on the Think Tech Hawaii Broadcast Network. E Hana Kako, that's what we like to say at the Grassroot Institute. It sounds like a pule kako, which means let's pray together. We also say at the Grassroot Institute, E Hana Kako, let's work together, because think of the terrible alternative of people not working together. Let's work together to build a better economy, government, and society. And with that, I'd like to say I'm so proud to be working with the Think Tech Hawaii organization. Producer Jay Fidel and the many staff and volunteers really do a wonderful job of producing about 35 hours of original content that goes out from Honolulu to the world. We're here every week on Mondays at 2 o'clock p.m., but you can watch anytime you want by going to thinktechhawaii.com and looking up the archives, or going to the Grassroot Institute website. Now back to Malia and Andy. Malia, I've got a question for you, and that is how the federal government impacts our liberties in the state of Hawaii, and sometimes negatively impacts the constitutional values of the First Amendment and other constitutional values. We have been observing the role of the Department of Interior over the past several decades, as it has, in many ways, invaded the autonomy of Hawaii. And there are some very serious concerns, particularly with regard to some of their gambits regarding the Native Hawaiian people. What are your concerns about the Department of Interior and its impact upon the state of Hawaii?
Yes, I felt like maybe you were opening a can of, worms in terms of competition among states to say who is being most hard done by the federal government. But I think that Hawaii can really make a strong case for itself, because I don't know of another state that has the Department of Interior ready to just ball up the Constitution and toss it away because of a political point, which is the creation of a Native Hawaiian tribe, but not a tribe because we can't really do that, but we're going to try anyway.
Well, I'm going to let you.
Not the actual name of it.
Right. I'm going to let you continue with that thought, but I'm going to interrupt and then give it right back to you. I'm a part Native Hawaiian and very much aware, not only from talking with other Native Hawaiians, but also looking at the surveys that have been done, as well as the attempts by the Office of Hawaiian Affairs and Native Hawaiian Roll Commission to gather all the voices of Hawaiians up into one voice. And we're very much aware that Native Hawaiians are not in favor of a federally recognized Department of Interior administered tribe. That Native Hawaiians never were a tribe. Native Hawaiians are not a tribe. There's a huge amount of diversity amongst us. We're Democrats, Republicans, Independents, Americans and anti-Americans, all of us. And so this idea that the federal government is pursuing to establish a federal tribe, federally recognized tribe of Native Hawaiians through the Department of Interior. What's behind this, Malia? If it's not the Native Hawaiians themselves, what is behind this?
Well, I think that it's always easiest to look and see who benefits. I mean, even the most optimistic Native Hawaiian tribe activist could not look at the hearings that they had on this issue last year and say anything other than, wow, this is very controversial. If you were more honest, you would say there is a very strong vocal movement among Native Hawaiians not to have federal recognition, not to have a federal tribe. But there's been a push nonetheless. A cynic might point out that there's a huge amount of money and land at stake, especially considering that OHA is stated its intention to transfer its assets to this Native Hawaiian entity if and when it should ever come to pass. So there's a huge amounts of power, land, interest, money at stake at the creation of a federally recognized Indian tribe. There's also this attempt to kind of dance around existing court precedents because, Rice v. Cayetano, if you remember back when, said, hey, you can't make these things exclusive to Native Hawaiians. And the response to that on the part of OHA was, and various people like that, was, well, let's make a federal Indian tribe and then we can protect all of our special benefits. So the tribal push is really from people who want to protect special benefits, despite the fact that no one in Hawaii, and I think as Grassroot we can say this, because we would know, no one in Hawaii is really trying to take those away. But there's this desire to protect this money, this land, all these kinds of things going to Native Hawaiians. And in the process, the irony is they're putting it at risk.
That's right. Well, Malia, thanks for that introduction. And we could be here all day if we talked about the things that the Grassroot Institute and Grassroot Hawaii Action are doing to help preserve the Aloha Spirit, to help preserve that sense that there is harmony and inclusiveness in the citizenry of Hawaii, and fight off some of these efforts that are not well thought through, that appear to be efforts to help Hawaiian people but ultimately hurt them. But there's one, Andy, that I'd like to ask you about, just one of the measures that we're pursuing as you are there in Washington, D.C., working directly with some key senators and representatives to get some legislation passed that has been sponsored by Mr. Bishop there. And tell us a little bit about that remarkable bill and how that actually may make a difference with respect to the Department of Interior.
Okay, well, there is quite a battle going on in Washington over this because Congress, by the Constitution, have plenary power to recognize an Indian tribe. And this has been snatched away by the Department of Interior as they just are reaching everywhere for more and more power. So Representative Bishop of Utah has introduced the Tribal Recognition Act of 2015. I think it will now be 2016.
That's right.
And that states very simply that only Congress can recognize an Indian tribe. And I've had conversations with Representative Bishop, and he is very much amenable to being certain that that includes any government entity type form recognizing the Hawaiians. It's not an Indian tribe, because this is the duty of Congress, our elected representatives. And frankly, Congress is pretty well offended that the Department of Interior has tried to snatch this away. So there is legislation moving through Congress now. It is going to pass out of that committee, and there's, every earnest effort to see that this gets moved forward and Congress resumes its by law obligation to take this in hand.
That's right.
So and on the Senate side as well, the Senate is equally unhappy with the Department of Interior overreach, not just on this, but on other things that affect Hawaii. And that's one of the things we do up here, is to look out for the things you don't realize are going to happen to you from the federal government. But the Department of Interior overreach in this way is also getting very bad reaction from several senators, and Senator Lamar Alexander of Tennessee is leading an effort to put a stop to this. And I can give you a lot of detail, but the answer is the Congress is not happy, and they are moving on this. And we are right out in front.
Well, thank you. And I think that is so important that Congress is able to see that representatives from Hawaii through the grassroots movement are actually taking the charge and actually leading the charge, because this isn't simply about members of Congress at large trying to stop something that takes away the powers of Congress. It's people from Hawaii that are making a difference. Now, yes.
Specifically, just to make this point really quickly, this bill has been written, it's going forward. I was at a hearing, I'm able to corner Representative Bishop and ask that particular language be included. So because Hawaii has a representative here participating in this and able to speak to Congress, we're able to see that the people of Hawaii are looked after.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that. And while we respect and are friends with our 4 congressional delegates in D.C. from Hawaii, none of them is taking the lead in advancing the kind of policy that needs to be taking place here. And we hope they will join us in our efforts. But in the meantime, Grassroot Institute will show that people from Hawaii care and want to restore the proper order in our government. Now, Malia, you are leading the team as we are crafting our positions and responses to the legislative session in Hawaii, which just opened up now in the month of January. And as you and I know very well, that there are many things that we fight and fend off that fortunately don't actually get passed. And there's one this morning in our policy team meeting we were talking about, and that is the endeavor of people here in the state of Hawaii, some legislators who want Hawaii to start a state bank. What do you think about that?
I actually had to read that one twice, to be perfectly honest, because I thought I must have misunderstood it the first time I read it. Absolutely. There's only one other state in the whole United States that has a state bank. That's North Dakota. It's not even necessarily all that common among countries, at least in a way that this one is envisioned.
Well, we have central education, central labor, central power grid, everything. And now we're going to have a central bank in the state of Hawaii. But tell our viewers a little bit more about what that bank is going to do first and foremost in terms of failing mortgages in the state.
I thought you were going to just cut it off at failing. Yes, Central has worked so well for us up to now, so why not just put all money in it too? Really, we expect that what it will do is buy up failing mortgages and thereby spin us further and further into recession. It's, in theory, what it will do is it will become the bank for the state of all the state agencies, thereby weakening the existing banking system in our state. It's a sort of semi-socialist institution. it's really stunning, given the lack of transparency and accountability in our government. Probably one of the least transparent when it comes right down to it. You know, in intent, very transparent; in action, not remotely transparent. And yet they propose a state bank. It's stunning. I mean, I don't know that we'd expect that it will go anywhere. We certainly plan to testify against it, and I'm sure we'll be in good company. But the ways in which this has the potential to fail Hawaii taxpayers is almost limitless, really.
That's right. In fact, the thing about this kind of proposed legislation is that once it's exposed for its ludicrousy, it kind of disappears because politicians and others would be embarrassed to back this. For example, we're a state that has huge unfunded liabilities for our retired employees in the public system. And we're in no shape from an asset point of view to manage a central bank. But unless that gets pointed out, this kind of legislation might pass. And so this is a good point for us to end today's program, pointing out that one of the ways in which Grassroot is changing Hawaii is by blowing the whistle on a lot of crazy ideas before they could ever become real practices here in the state. Let me let Andy say goodbye and sign off. Thank you very much for being with us and being up there in DC working for Hawaii's benefit, Andy.
Aloha, proud to be here, proud to serve Hawaii.
And Malia, aloha to you. Thank you for leading our team's policy efforts here in Hawaii.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Well, and to all of you watching, we are grateful for your support of the Grassroot Institute as well as ThinkTech Hawaii, our partner, and we're looking forward to bringing you all the latest on what's going on at our state legislature and in terms of state policy as we attempt together to build a better economy, government, and society. I'm Keli'i Akina for the Grassroot Institute. Until next week, aloha.